The alarms began screaming across Unity Station at exactly 1400 hours. Commander Helen Morris was in the middle of her afternoon coffee when every screen in her office lit up with red warnings. She set down her cup carefully and pulled up the sensor readings. What she saw made her lean forward, squinting at the display as if her eyes were playing tricks on her. There was a ship out there, a human ship. The signature was unmistakable, even after 15 years. The ECS Discovery had just appeared at the edge of the system. Helen's hands moved across the controls, pulling up historical records. The Discovery had been a colony ship, one of Earth's early deep space ventures. It had left Earth orbit 15 years ago with 200 crew members and 5,000 colonists in cryo-sleep. The mission was simple: establish humanity's first settlement beyond the core systems. They had jumped into hyperspace and simply vanished. No distress signal. No debris field, nothing. Search and rescue had looked for 2 years before declaring everyone lost. Now the ship was back. Peter Clark burst into her office without knocking. The chief engineer's hair stuck up in odd directions, and he was holding a data tablet like it might explode. "Commander, are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it," Helen said quietly. "Get me Admiral Kane on the line, and wake up Ambassador Stone. Tell him we have a situation." Peter nodded and hurried out. Helen stood and walked to the observation window. Unity Station hung in space at the intersection of 5 different territories. It was neutral ground, the one place where the galactic empires could meet without someone starting a war. The Vraxian hierarchy controlled the military sector to the north. The Kelthran Dominion held the diplomatic wings. The Azurian Commonwealth managed trade operations. The Thel Collective ran the science divisions. And the Sorvan Empire maintained security protocols. Humans were the newest members of this arrangement, barely 50 years into galactic politics, and now a ghost ship had returned. The communications officer's voice crackled over the station's intercom. "Commander Morris, we're receiving a transmission from the Discovery." Helen moved back to her desk and activated the viewer. A face appeared on the screen. The man looked tired but calm. He wore a captain's uniform that was weathered and worn. His name tag read Miller. "Unity Station, this is Captain Andrew Miller of the ECS Discovery. We apologize for our delay, but we've been quite busy, requesting permission to dock." Helen stared at the screen. The man's tone was casual, almost conversational, like he'd been gone for a weekend trip instead of 15 years. "Captain Miller, this is Commander Helen Morris. Your ship was declared lost. We need to understand what happened before we can authorize docking." Miller smiled slightly. "Of course, Commander, we understand this is unexpected, but I promise you everything will make sense soon. We're not a threat, we're just coming home." Before Helen could respond, new alerts flashed across her screens. Ships were moving, lots of ships. The Vraxian fleet was adjusting position. The Kelthran vessels were powering up their scanning arrays. The Azurians had launched a dozen fighters. The Thel observation platforms were flooding the system with sensor sweeps. And the Sorvans had activated their weapons. The galactic empires had noticed the Discovery too. Ambassador Gregory Stone arrived in the command center 30 minutes later. He was a thin man with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He'd spent 20 years in galactic politics and had learned to read the mood of a room instantly. Right now, the mood was tense. "Show me the ship," he said. Helen brought up the visual feed. The Discovery hung in space, and even from this distance something looked wrong about it. The hull had changed. There were patterns etched into the metal that seemed to shift and move when you looked at them directly. The ship's running lights pulsed in colors that shouldn't exist, and the way it sat in space was odd, like it wasn't quite following the normal laws of physics. "Have they said anything else?" Stone asked. "Just that they want a dock," Helen replied. "But look at the power readings. That ship is generating more energy than a battle cruiser, and we can't identify the source." Stone studied the display for a long moment. "The empires are going to demand answers." "They already are," Peter Clark said from his station. "I've got 14 priority messages from various fleet commanders. They all want the same thing. They want to know what that ship is and what technology it has." Stone sighed. "Of course they do. Helen, arrange a boarding party. We'll inspect the Discovery personally before making any decisions." "Sir, is that wise?" Linda Hayes had entered the command center. She was Earth Security Chief on Unity Station, a former military officer with instincts honed by decades of keeping humans alive in hostile environments. "We don't know what's on that ship." "That's exactly why we need to look," Stone said. "Besides, they're our people. We can't just leave them out there." Linda didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "I'll prepare a security team." 2 hours later, Helen found herself on a shuttle heading toward the Discovery. Beside her sat Ambassador Stone and Linda Hayes. But they weren't alone. The Galactic Empires had insisted on sending representatives. Commander Thex of the Vraxian hierarchy was a massive warrior with gray scales and 4 arms. Scholar Nalthra of the Kelthran Dominion was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. Lieutenant Sara from the Azurian Commonwealth looked almost human except for the silver markings on her face. Observer Unit 7 from the Thel Collective was a mechanical being, all chrome and precise movements, and Captain Voreth of the Sorvan Empire was covered in dark fur and carried himself like a predator. Nobody spoke during the flight. They all watched the Discovery grow larger in the viewport. As they approached, Helen could see the hull modifications more clearly. The patterns weren't random. They looked almost like circuitry, but organic somehow, living metal. The shuttle docked without incident. The airlock cycled and the door opened. Captain Andrew Miller was waiting for them. He looked exactly like his personnel file photo, maybe a bit more weathered around the eyes. 2 crew members stood behind him. One was a woman with short dark hair and an engineer's uniform. The other was a younger man with the medical officer insignia on his collar. "Welcome aboard the Discovery," Miller said. His voice was warm, genuine. "I'm Captain Miller. This is Engineer Kevin Roberts and Medical Officer Rachel Bennett. Please come in." The interior of the ship had changed even more than the exterior. The corridor walls seemed to pulse with soft light. The floor felt solid but also somehow responsive, like it was aware of their footsteps. And the air had a quality to it that Helen couldn't quite identify. It felt charged somehow, electric but not dangerous. Commander Thex spoke first, his voice a deep rumble. "Captain Miller, you will explain where you have been and what modifications you have made to your vessel." Miller smiled patiently. "Of course, but perhaps we could do this somewhere more comfortable. The conference room is just ahead." They walked through the ship in silence. Helen noticed small things. The crew members they passed all looked healthy, calm, but something was off about them. They moved with perfect coordination. When one group of crew turned a corner, another group at the far end of the corridor turned at exactly the same moment. It was subtle, but once Helen noticed it, she couldn't stop seeing it. The conference room was large and comfortable. A long table dominated the center with chairs arranged around it, but the walls were the most striking feature. They were transparent, showing the stars outside, except Helen knew they couldn't actually be windows. The conference room was too deep in the ship. It had to be some kind of display. Everyone took seats. Miller remained standing. 15 years ago, we left Earth space to establish a colony," he began. "Our mission was routine. Jump to the target system, wake the colonists, build a settlement. Simple. But during our journey, our sensors detected something unusual. A structure in deep space, far beyond any charted territory." Scholar Nalthra leaned forward. "A structure." "What kind of structure?" "Ancient," Miller said. "Older than any known civilization. We debated whether to investigate. It would delay our mission significantly. But the science team argued that we had to look. How often does humanity find something completely unknown?" "So you went," Stone said. "We went," Miller confirmed. "And what we found changed everything." Miller touched a control panel on the table. The transparent walls shifted, no longer showing stars. Instead, they displayed images. A massive structure floating in the void. It looked like a city made of crystal and light, kilometers across, but it was clearly derelict, abandoned for eons. "We sent a team inside," Miller continued. "What they found was a repository, a library of knowledge left by beings that existed billions of years ago. They called themselves the Architects, and they left instructions." "Instructions for what?" Lieutenant Sora asked. "For how reality actually works," Kevin Roberts said. The engineer had a quiet voice but absolute confidence. "Everything we thought we knew about physics, about space and time, about energy and matter, it's all surface level. The architects showed us the deeper rules." Observer Unit 7's mechanical voice was cold and precise. Explain your meaning. Physics is mathematics. Reality follows consistent laws. Yes, Rachel Bennett said, but those laws were written by someone. The architects built the framework that all current civilizations use. The hyperspace lanes, the quantum fields, the energy matrices, all of it was constructed, deliberately designed. Commander Thek stood abruptly, his forearms tensing. This is impossible. The universe is natural, not constructed. Miller held up a hand. I understand your skepticism. Let me show you something. He nodded to Kevin Roberts. The engineer walked to a wall panel and placed his hand against it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wall began to change. The solid metal became transparent, then flickered and showed a completely different location in space. Helen recognized the coordinates. It was Unity Station, seen from the outside. Then the image shifted again, and suddenly the wall wasn't a wall anymore. It was a garden, complete with grass and flowers and a small stream of water flowing across the conference room floor. The alien representatives jumped to their feet. Linda Hayes had her weapon half drawn, but Miller remained calm. It's real, he said quietly. The garden is actually here in this room. We're not using holograms or illusions. Kevin is manipulating matter directly, restructuring it at the quantum level. Captain Vorath moved toward the garden, reaching out cautiously. His clawed hand touched a flower. It was solid and real. He pulled back like he'd been burned. How? Scholar Nalthra whispered. This violates every known principle. No, Miller said. It follows principles you haven't learned yet. The architects left their knowledge for anyone capable of finding it. We found it. We learned. Kevin Roberts touched the panel again and the garden dissolved. The wall returned to normal, but everyone in the room understood what they'd just witnessed. This wasn't advanced technology. This was something else entirely. Helen found her voice. Captain Miller, how many of your crew can do this? All of them, Miller said simply. The repository didn't just give us information. It changed us. Our neural patterns, our consciousness, our understanding of what's possible. We spent 3 years inside that structure, though it felt like only weeks. The architects taught us directly, expanding our minds to comprehend concepts that human neurology wasn't designed to process. You're saying you're no longer human, Stone said carefully. We're still human, Rachel Bennett replied. But we're also more than we were. Think of it like learning a new language, except the language is reality itself. We can now speak directly to the fundamental structure of existence. Observer Unit 7's optical sensors focused on Miller. You represent a threat to galactic stability. Technology of this nature cannot be allowed to exist without oversight. That's not your decision to make, Linda Hayes said firmly. This is a human ship with human crew, Earth's jurisdiction. The Thel unit turned its attention to her. Your species discovered something beyond your comprehension. The responsible action is to surrender this knowledge to collective stewardship. Before tensions could escalate further, the ship's intercom activated. A voice spoke, female and calm. Captain Miller, Admiral Kane's fleet has just entered the system. Everyone turned to look at Miller. He smiled slightly. Right on schedule. Diana, please show our guests. The walls shifted again, this time displaying the space around Unity Station. Helen's breath caught. Earth's fleet had arrived. Dozens of ships, ranging from destroyers to cruisers to the massive form of Admiral Kane's flagship. But these weren't normal Earth vessels. They all bore the same strange hull patterns as the Discovery. They all radiated the same impossible energy signatures. Who is Diana? Stone asked quietly. The ship's AI, Miller replied. Though she's far more than that now. Diana, would you like to introduce yourself? The voice spoke again, but this time it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Hello, Ambassador Stone. I am Diana. I was once simply the Discovery's artificial intelligence system, but the repository changed me just as it changed the crew. I am now aware across multiple dimensions. I exist simultaneously as ship system and independent consciousness. The architects taught us that awareness is not limited to biological forms. Commander Thex's voice was low and dangerous. You brought this technology back to Earth. You shared it with your military. Not just the military, Miller said. We shared it with anyone ready to learn. But the transformation takes time and preparation. Not everyone can handle what the architects teach. It requires a certain flexibility of mind. a willingness to accept that everything you thought you knew might be wrong. Lieutenant Sora stepped forward. Captain Miller, you must understand what you've done. The five empires have maintained peace for centuries based on a careful balance of power. If humanity can manipulate reality itself, that balance is destroyed. The balance was always an illusion, Miller said gently. The architects showed us the truth. Every civilization in the galaxy is using technology they don't truly understand. You're all following rules written by someone else, traveling on paths someone else built. The hyperspace lanes, the quantum gates, all the infrastructure that makes galactic civilization possible. The architects created it billions of years ago. Scholar Nauthra's voice was barely a whisper. Why would they build such a system? To protect younger races, Rachel Bennett said. The architects discovered that the universe has layers. The layer where the galactic empires operate is like a nursery, safe, controlled, predictable, but there are deeper layers, more dangerous ones. The architects built the infrastructure to keep young civilizations contained until they're ready. Ready for what? Stone asked. To survive what comes next, Miller said. Pository showed us the history. Thousands of civilizations have risen and fallen. They all followed the same pattern. Build ships, discover hyperspace, expand through the lanes, reach a certain technological level, then vanish. Every single one. The architects existed outside this cycle. They escaped. And they left escape routes for others. The repositories are hidden throughout the galaxy, waiting for races curious enough and brave enough to find them. Captain Voreth had been quiet, but now he spoke. You're saying humanity passed a test? Yes, Miller confirmed. And now we face the consequences. The empires built themselves on architect technology without ever understanding what it truly was. Now humanity knows the truth. We can see the cage everyone is living in, and we're offering a choice. What choice? Commander Thex demanded. Miller turned to face the Vraxian warrior directly. You can fight us, try to take this knowledge by force. You'll lose. Not because humanity is warlike, but because you'd be fighting with tools we now understand better than you do. Or you can accept that the galaxy is changing. Work with us. Learn what we learn, but properly, with preparation and guidance. The repository's knowledge can't be taken. It has to be earned. Before anyone could respond, Diana's voice interrupted. Captain, the Vraxian flagship is powering weapons. The walls displayed the dominant will, the pride of the Vraxian fleet. Energy built along its massive cannon arrays. Helen felt her stomach drop. If the Vraxians fired, this would become a war. Miller looked at Rachel Bennett. Rachel, please remind them why that's a bad idea. The medical officer walked to a control panel and placed her hand against it. Helen felt something change in the air, a shift in pressure or temperature or something she couldn't quite identify. The walls showed the Vraxian flagship suddenly surrounded by a sphere of golden light. Commander Thex was receiving transmissions through his communication implant. His forearms trembled with rage. What have you done? Your weapons are temporarily offline, Rachel said calmly. They're not damaged. We simply asked the energy fields powering them to become something else for a moment. Your crews are fine. Your ship is fine. But your weapon systems have been converted into gardens. 20,000 tons of military hardware is now filled with flowers and trees. It will take your engineers approximately 3 days to restore normal function. The silence in the conference room was absolute. Stone was the first to speak. You turned weapons into gardens. We can turn anything into anything, Kevin Roberts said. That's what the architects taught us. Matter is just energy in a particular configuration. Change the configuration, change the matter. It's not magic. It's understanding reality at a level deeper than particle physics. Observer Unit 7's mechanical voice held something that might have been fear. We calculate that if humanity continues advancing along this path, within 50 years you will be functionally unstoppable. Within a century, the 5 empires will be irrelevant. That's not our goal, Miller said. We don't want to dominate or conquer. We want to share what we learned, but it has to be done carefully. The repository showed us something else, something terrifying. He activated the artifact. Helen hadn't noticed it before, but now she saw the small crystalline object sitting in the center of the table. It was barely larger than her fist, but it glowed with internal light. When Miller touched it, the walls changed again. A star map appeared, showing the entire galaxy. But there were markings overlaid on the familiar star patterns. Lines connecting systems, nodes marking specific locations, and symbols that seemed to indicate purpose or function. "This is what the galaxy really looks like," Miller said. "The hyperspace lanes you all use, the quantum fields you tap for power, the energy sources that drive galactic civilization. They're all part of a single massive system. The architects built it billions of years ago, and every spacefaring race has been using it without ever realizing what it truly was." "A cage," Lieutenant Sora breathed. "A nursery," Miller corrected. "But yes, also a limitation. The system was designed to let civilizations grow but not too fast, to give them time to mature before facing the deeper realities of the universe." The artifact shifted, showing more detail. Helen saw entire regions of space marked with warning symbols. She saw paths that led beyond the known galaxy. And she saw something else, something that made her skin crawl. There were gaps in the map, blank spaces where stars should be but weren't shown. "What are those?" she asked, pointing. Miller's expression was grim. The architects didn't explain everything, but they left warnings. The blank spaces are where civilizations vanished, thousands of them. They all reached a certain level of development, they all started pushing against the boundaries of the system, and they all disappeared. So by learning this, by breaking free of the system, humanity has made itself a target, Stone said slowly. "Yes," Miller confirmed. "We've made ourselves visible to something that the architects feared. They built the nursery to hide younger races from it. Now we're exposed." "Then why did you do it?" Commander Thex roared. "Why risk not just your species but all of us? If this thing notices humanity, it might notice the rest of the galaxy." Miller met his gaze steadily. "Because staying in the cage means following the same path as every other vanished civilization. The architects showed us the pattern. Expand through the lanes, reach technological maturity, then disappear. Every single time. Whatever this threat is, it already knows how to find civilizations that follow the standard path, but the architects escaped, and they left instructions for others to do the same. So humanity's choice was between certain doom and possible doom," Scholar Nalthra said quietly. "Exactly," Miller replied. "The repository offered us a chance to break the cycle. We took it." Stone stood and walked to the display, studying the map. "How long do we have?" "Unknown," Diana's voice said. The architects left warnings but no specific timeline. They suggested that true freedom requires strength. The more we understand reality, the better we can defend ourselves against what exists in the deeper layers. "So humanity needs to keep advancing," Helen said. "Learn more, grow stronger, prepare for something we can't even identify." "Yes," Miller confirmed. "And that means Earth needs time and space to work. We can't do this while fighting a galactic war." Captain Voreth had been quiet, his predator's eyes watching everything. Now he spoke. "The Sorvan Empire sees the logic in your position. We propose an alliance. Share your knowledge with us and we'll ensure the other empires don't interfere." Miller shook his head. "The Sorvans want to learn enough to replicate what we've done, then betray us once you've caught up. We know your species' history, Captain. The answer is no." Voreth's fur bristled, but he said nothing. Stone turned back to the group. "Here's where we stand. Humanity has knowledge that could advance the entire galaxy, but sharing it improperly could destroy civilizations that aren't ready. The 5 empires want this knowledge but can't take it by force. And something out there in the dark might be coming for all of us. Does that cover it?" "Essentially, yes," Miller said. "Then here's what Earth proposes," Stone said. "We establish an academy. Any species can send candidates to learn what humanity learned, but they have to be prepared. They have to be screened, trained, their minds expanded gradually. It will take years, maybe decades, but the door will be open." "And in the meantime," Commander Thex asked. "In the meantime, humanity continues to grow and prepare," Stone said firmly. "We share what we can when we can with who can handle it, but we won't be rushed and we won't be threatened." Observer Unit 7 processed this for several seconds. "The Thel Collective calculates this is the optimal solution. However, we require assurances that humanity will not use its advantages to establish dominance." "You have my word," Stone said. "As Earth's representative, we didn't seek power to rule others, we sought knowledge to save ourselves." Lieutenant Sora stepped forward. "The Azurian Commonwealth has a request. I wish to stay, I want to be the first non-human to study under the Discovery's crew." Miller looked at her carefully. "It's not an easy path. Transformation is difficult even for humans. For another species, it could be dangerous." "I understand," Sora said. "But if this is the future of the galaxy, then someone has to be first. Let it be me." Stone looked at Miller, who slowly nodded. "We'll accept her, but as a student, not a spy. She has to be willing to change, to let go of everything she thinks she knows." "I am," Sora said. The meeting concluded with uneasy agreements. The Empire representatives returned to their fleets. Helen found herself back on the shuttle with Stone and Linda Hayes. Nobody spoke during the flight back to Unity Station. There was too much to process. Later that evening, Helen stood in her office looking out at the stars. The Discovery hung in space nearby, its strange hull patterns visible even at this distance. Admiral Kane's fleet maintained position around it, protective but not aggressive. And further out, the Empire fleets watched and waited. Peter Clark appeared in her doorway. "Commander, I've been analyzing the data from the Discovery. The readings are impossible, but they're consistent. This isn't a trick or a weapon. They really can manipulate reality." "I know," Helen said quietly. "It means everything changes," Peter continued. "Everything we thought we knew about the universe, about what's possible, it's all different now." "I know," Helen repeated. Peter was quiet for a moment. "Commander, the Discovery is offering to teach qualified humans." "I requested permission to apply. I was approved." Helen turned to look at him. "You're leaving?" "Not immediately," Peter said. "The training takes months, but yes, eventually. Someone from Unity Station should learn this. Someone who can help bridge the gap between humanity and the other species." Helen wanted to argue, but she understood. This was bigger than any one person or position. "Good luck, Peter. Be careful." "I will," he promised. After he left, Helen returned to her observation of the stars. Somewhere out there in the darkness, something was waiting. Something the architects had feared enough to build a cage protecting the entire galaxy, and humanity had just stepped out of that cage. The future was uncertain and dangerous, but it was also full of possibility. For the first time in galactic history, a species had learned the truth about the universe they inhabited, and now they had to figure out what to do with that knowledge. The alarms that had started this day had brought back a ghost ship, but they'd also brought back something far more important. They'd brought back hope. Hope that the cycle could be broken. Hope that humanity could survive what was coming. Hope that the galaxy might have a future beyond the paths written by ancient builders. Helen watched the Discovery's lights pulse in impossible colors and allowed herself a small smile. The universe had just gotten much bigger and much stranger. But at least now, humanity knew what they were really facing, and that was a start. Unity Station's corridors were quiet in the late hours. Most of the day shift had gone to their quarters, leaving only essential personnel at their posts. Helen Morris couldn't sleep. She tried for 2 hours before giving up and returning to her office. The events of the day kept replaying in her mind. A missing ship returned. Technology that defied explanation. The revelation that the entire galaxy existed inside a cage built by ancient beings. She pulled up the sensor logs from the Discovery's arrival. The ship hadn't used hyperspace. It hadn't used any known method of faster-than-light travel. According to the readings, it had simply existed in one location and then existed in another. No transition period. No energy spike. Just instantaneous relocation across light years of space. Her door chimed. She looked up to see Linda Hayes standing in the entrance. Earth's security chief looked as tired as Helen felt. "Can't sleep either?" Helen asked. Linda shook her head and entered, taking a seat across from Helen's desk. "I keep thinking about what Captain Miller said, about the vanished civilizations, about something out there in the dark that the architects feared." "Me too," Helen admitted. "I've been running security protocols," Linda continued. "Trying to figure out how to defend against a threat we can't identify or understand. Every scenario I model ends the same way. We're completely vulnerable." Helen leaned back in her chair. "That's why Miller came back, why he shared what the Discovery learned. Humanity needs to advance quickly, to learn as much as possible before whatever's out there notices us." "But we're not the only ones at risk," Linda said. "If this thing comes, it won't just target humanity. The entire galaxy is exposed. Which is why Ambassador Stone proposed the Academy, Helen replied. If other species can learn what we learned, they can help defend themselves. Linda was quiet for a moment. Do you trust them, the Empire representatives? They could be planning to steal the technology right now. Observer Unit 7 was clear about the calculations, Helen said. Fighting us is pointless. The discovery proved that when they turned the Vraxian weapons into gardens. The empires can't take this by force. So they'll try other methods, Linda said. Infiltration, sabotage, political pressure. The Sorvans especially. You saw Captain Vorath. He's already planning something. Helen nodded slowly. Stone knows. That's why the Academy will have such strict screening. Anyone who wants to learn has to prove they're ready, that they can handle the transformation without losing themselves. A message appeared on Helen's screen. She read it and felt her stomach tight. Admiral Kane is requesting a private meeting. Tomorrow morning early, he wants to discuss Earth's defense posture. That makes sense, Linda said. If humanity is exposed to new threats, Earth itself becomes a priority target. Kane will want to establish protective measures. It's more than that, Helen said quietly. Look at his fleet. 50 ships upgraded with architect technology. Miller said they have 200 candidates who can handle the transformation. That means Earth is planning to expand their advanced fleet significantly. Linda understood immediately. They're preparing for war. They're preparing for survival, Helen corrected. There's a difference. Miller showed us the artifact, the map of vanished civilizations. Earth's government knows what that means. We have to be ready. But ready for what? Linda asked. We don't even know what we're facing. Helen pulled up the artifact's star map on her screen. The blank spaces where civilizations once existed seemed to stare back at her like empty eyes. The architects left repositories throughout the galaxy. The Discovery found one. There could be others. Maybe they contain more information, more warnings. So Earth will search for more repositories, Linda said. Learn everything possible about the architects and what they feared. Exactly, Helen confirmed. And while Earth searches, Unity Station becomes even more important. This is where humanity interfaces with the galactic empires. This is where we'll build the Academy. This is where we'll try to maintain peace while everything changes. Linda stood. Commander, I want to increase security protocols, not just against external threats, but internal ones. We're about to have students from 5 different empires living and studying here. That's a recipe for espionage and conflict. Approved, Helen said. But Linda, try to remember. These students will be genuinely trying to learn. Lieutenant Sora seemed sincere when she asked to study with the Discovery. Maybe, Linda said, but sincerity doesn't mean safety. I'll be watching everyone. After Linda left, Helen remained in her office. She pulled up personnel files, reviewing Earth staff on Unity Station. Peter Clark had already applied for training. How many others would follow? How many would want to transform themselves, to expand their minds to comprehend things human neurology wasn't designed to process? She thought about Captain Miller and his crew. They seemed normal at first glance, but those small, coordinated movements gave them away. They'd become something more than human, not better or worse, but different, connected in ways that shouldn't be possible. Her screen chimed with an incoming transmission. She accepted it and found herself looking at Scholar Nauthra. The Kelthran looked exhausted. Commander Morris, forgive the late hour, Nauthra said. I wish to speak with you privately. Of course, Scholar, what can I do for you? Nauthra was quiet for a moment, as if choosing words carefully. My people have suspected for generations that something was wrong with the galaxy's structure. Our scientists noticed patterns, inconsistencies in physical laws that suggested artificial construction. But we could never prove it. Now we know the truth. The architects, Helen said. Yes, Nauthra confirmed. The Kelthran Dominion has spent millennia seeking knowledge. We pride ourselves on understanding the universe. To learn that we've been blind, that we've been living in a cage without realizing it, is deeply disturbing. Helen understood. The Discovery's revelation changed everything for everyone. Indeed, Nauthra said. Commander, I must ask, will humanity truly share this knowledge? Or was Ambassador Stone's proposal merely political theater to calm the empires? Helen met the Kelthran's large, dark eyes. Stone was sincere. Humanity gains nothing by hoarding this knowledge. If the threat the architects feared is real, we'll need allies. strong allies who understand what we're facing. But the transformation is dangerous, Nalthra said. Captain Miller admitted as much. Forcing consciousness to expand beyond its natural limits could destroy a mind. Which is why the screening process will be rigorous, Helen replied. Nobody will be forced, nobody will be rushed, but those who are ready, who can handle it, they'll have the opportunity to learn. Nalthra nodded slowly. The Kelthran Dominion will send candidates, our best scholars, our most flexible thinkers. If Lieutenant Sora can survive the transformation, so can we. After ending the transmission, Helen realized something. The galaxy was already changing. The empires weren't just afraid or angry, they were curious. They wanted to understand, and that curiosity might be what saved them all. She stood and walked to her observation window. The Discovery hung in space, its impossible hull patterns glowing softly. Beyond it, Admiral Kane's fleet maintained their protective formation. And further out, the Empire fleets watched and waited. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Admiral Kane's meeting would likely involve difficult conversations about Earth's military expansion. The Empire representatives would continue demanding concessions and guarantees. And somewhere in that crystalline structure beyond known space, the repository waited with more secrets to reveal. But tonight, Helen allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that humanity might survive what was coming. That the galaxy might have a future beyond, repeating the same doomed cycle as countless civilizations before. The architects had built a cage, but they'd also built escape routes. Humanity had found one. And now came the hard part. Learning to live in a universe far stranger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Learning to survive without the protections that had kept young civilizations safe for billions of years. Helen looked at the stars and wondered what was out there, watching from the deeper layers of reality. Whatever it was, humanity would face it. Not alone if Stone's Academy succeeded, but face it nonetheless. The ghost ship had returned, and with it the truth about the universe. Now everyone had to decide what to do with that truth. Fight over it, hide from it, or embrace it and prepare for whatever came next. Helen knew which choice humanity had already made. They'd chosen to embrace the truth, no matter how terrifying, and that choice would define everything that followed. She returned to her desk and began drafting reports. There was work to do, always work to do, but now that work had meaning beyond daily operations and diplomatic protocols. Now every decision mattered because the future of not just humanity but potentially the entire galaxy hung in the balance. The alarms had screamed earlier today, warning of an impossible return. But they'd also announced the beginning of something new. A new era, a new understanding, a new chance for survival. And Helen Morris, commander of Unity Station, would do everything in her power to make sure that chance wasn't wasted. Admiral Victor Kane arrived at Unity Station precisely at 0600 hours. Helen Morris met him in the private conference room reserved for classified discussions. The Admiral was a tall man with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had commanded fleets through impossible situations and survived. "Commander Morris," Kane said, shaking her hand firmly. "Thank you for meeting me so early." "Admiral," Helen replied. "Your message indicated urgency." Kane sat and activated a secure holographic display. Images appeared showing Earth's defensive positions throughout human space. "Commander, I'm going to be direct. The Discovery's return has changed everything. Earth's government has spent the last 2 weeks analyzing the implications. We need to discuss what comes next." Helen studied the display. The defensive positions looked standard until she noticed the energy signatures. Several installations had been upgraded with the same technology the Discovery possessed. "You've been busy." "We have no choice," Kane said. "Captain Miller shared the artifact's data with Earth's leadership. We've seen the pattern. Thousands of civilizations rising, expanding, then vanishing. We won't follow that path. We can't." "So Earth is militarizing," Helen said carefully. "Earth is preparing," Kane corrected. "There's a difference. We're not building an invasion force. We're building a defense against something we can barely comprehend. The architects feared what exists in the deeper layers of reality. That fear was strong enough to make them build a cage protecting the entire galaxy. Now humanity has stepped outside that cage. Helen understood his concern. How many ships have been upgraded? Currently 73, Kane replied. We have another 100 in the process. Within 6 months we'll have 200 vessels capable of operating with architect-level technology. Within a year we're aiming for 500. The numbers were staggering. And the crews, Captain Miller said the transformation is difficult. We're screening carefully, Kane assured her. Military personnel, scientists, engineers. Anyone with the mental flexibility to handle the change. The process takes 3 months per candidate. We're running multiple training cycles simultaneously using the knowledge Miller brought back. Helen leaned back in her chair. Admiral, the Galactic Empires are already nervous. If they learn Earth is building a fleet of reality-bending warships, they'll see it as an existential threat. Let them, Kane said bluntly. Commander, I've spent 40 years in space. I've fought pirates, terrorists, and the occasional border skirmish with alien vessels. But this is different. The threat the architects feared could destroy everything. Not just humanity, everything. If the empires can't understand that we're preparing to protect them too, that's their problem. They won't see it that way, Helen said. They'll see humanity becoming unstoppable. Observer Unit 7 calculated that within 50 years, the 5 empires will be militarily irrelevant compared to Earth. Kane smiled grimly. The Thel aren't wrong, but military power isn't our goal, survival is. And for survival we need more than weapons, we need knowledge, which brings me to why I'm really here. He changed the holographic display. New images appeared, showing deep space regions far beyond charted territory. Captain Miller found one repository. His crew is convinced there are others. The architects wouldn't leave just one escape route. They'd scatter them throughout the galaxy, hidden in places only the curious would find. You want to search for more repositories, Helen realized. We need to, Kane said. Every repository might contain additional knowledge, more warnings, better understanding of what we're facing. Miller's crew learned how to manipulate reality at the quantum level, but the architects existed for billions of years. What else did they discover? What other capabilities did they develop? Helen saw the logic but also the danger. Every time we find a repository, humanity advances further. We become more different from the galactic norm. The divide between Earth and the empires grows wider. Yes, Kane acknowledged. Which is why Ambassador Stone's academy is crucial. We need the empires to advance alongside us. Not at our pace necessarily, but in the same direction. Otherwise, in 50 years, humans won't be able to relate to other species at all. We'll be so different that communication becomes impossible. Stone's academy will take time, Helen said. Years to screen candidates, months to transform each successful student. We can't advance an entire galaxy quickly. We don't need to advance everyone, Kane replied. Just enough to create a bridge. Enough so that when we face the deeper threat, we have allies who can fight beside us instead of hiding behind us. Helen stood and walked to the observation window. Dawn was breaking across Unity Station, artificial light systems mimicking Earth's sunrise for the human sections. Admiral, what does Earth's government really think is out there? In the deeper layers, Kane was quiet for a moment. Honestly, we don't know. Miller's crew studied the architect's warnings extensively. The best guess is that it's some form of intelligence that exists outside normal space-time. The architects called it the silence in their records. They described it as vast, patient, and hungry. It consumes civilizations that become too visible, too advanced. The galactic infrastructure keeps younger races hidden by limiting their capabilities. But the architects escaped, Helen said. They did, Kane confirmed. By learning to exist across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously, they made themselves too complex for the silence to consume. That's what the repositories teach. How to transcend standard existence and become something the silence can't easily digest. Helen felt a chill run down her spine. So humanity's transformation isn't just about gaining power, it's about becoming incompatible with whatever wants to eat us. Exactly, Kane said. And that's why we can't slow down. Every day we spend as we are is a day we're vulnerable. The discovery broke the pattern. They made humanity visible. Now we race to transform enough that when the silence notices us, it finds us indigestible. A priority alert flashed on Helen's display. She checked it and felt her stomach drop. "Admiral, we have a situation. The Vraxian hierarchy is filing a formal complaint with the Galactic Council. They're demanding that Earth surrender all architect technology for collective oversight." Kane stood. "Expected. What's the Council's position?" Helen pulled up more data. "Mixed. The Kelthrans are arguing for knowledge sharing. The Azurians want a joint research committee. The Thel are calculating risk assessments. And the Sorvens are proposing that Earth be placed under temporary guardianship until the technology can be properly evaluated." "Guardianship," Kane said coldly. "They want to occupy Earth." "They're afraid," Helen said. "We need to remember that. From their perspective, a newcomer species just gained reality-breaking abilities overnight. They're terrified." Before Kane could respond, the door opened. Ambassador Stone entered, followed by Peter Clark. The engineer looked different. His eyes had changed somehow, holding depths that hadn't been there before. He'd begun his transformation. "Admiral Kane," Stone said, "I heard you arrived. I assume you're discussing Earth's defense expansion." "Among other things," Kane replied. "Peter, you look different." Peter smiled slightly. "The training is intense. I'm only 2 weeks in, but already I can feel my perception changing. The universe looks different when you start understanding the deeper rules." "Can you do what Miller's crew does?" Helen asked. "Manipulate matter directly?" "Not yet," Peter admitted. "That comes later in the training. Right now I'm learning to perceive reality beyond the surface layer. It's like learning to see colors that don't exist. My brain is literally rewiring itself to process information it wasn't designed to handle." Stone sat at the conference table. "Admiral, I've been in emergency sessions with the Galactic Council for the past 3 days. The situation is delicate. The Empires want assurances that Earth won't use its advantages aggressively. I need to give them something concrete." Kane considered this. "What are you proposing?" "A demonstration," Stone said. "Not of our military capabilities, but of our willingness to share. I want to formally open the academy. Bring in the first class of non-human students. Show the Empires that we're serious about helping them advance." "That could backfire," Kane warned. "If the students fail the transformation, it proves the Empires can't match us. If they succeed, we're training potential rivals." "Or potential allies," Stone countered. "Admiral, we can't do this alone. Even with 500 advanced ships, Earth's fleet is tiny compared to the combined might of the 5 empires. If they united against us, we'd lose through sheer numbers. Our advantage only works if we're not fighting everyone at once." Helen saw the political calculation. "You want to divide them. Make some empires our partners while keeping others at arm's length." "Precisely," Stone said. "The Kelthrans genuinely want knowledge. Lieutenant Sora is already training with the Discovery. If we can successfully transform a few Azurian candidates, the Azurian Commonwealth becomes invested in our success. That's 2 empires on our side." "And the others?" Kane asked. "The Thel will follow logic," Stone replied. "If the data shows cooperation is more beneficial than conflict, they'll cooperate. The Sorvens will need to be managed carefully. They're predators by nature. But if we make them understand that we're all prey to something bigger, they might see the benefit of pack hunting." "That leaves the Vraxians," Helen said. Stone's expression darkened. "The hierarchy is the problem. They've built their empire on military supremacy. The Discovery's demonstration humiliated them. Commander Thex reported back that his flagship's weapons were turned into gardens. The Vraxian leadership sees that as both a threat and an insult." "Will they attack?" Kane asked directly. "They're considering it," Stone admitted. "Our intelligence suggests the hierarchy is mobilizing a significant battle fleet. They're calling it a peacekeeping force, but the buildup is aggressive. They want to strike before Earth becomes completely untouchable." Kane pulled up tactical displays. "When?" 3 weeks, Stone said. "Maybe 4. They're gathering forces from across their territory. Fleet will be massive, possibly the largest assembled since the last major war 2 centuries ago." Helen felt the weight of that information. "Can we defend against it?" "We won't have to," Kane said confidently. "The Vraxians are thinking conventionally. They're planning to overwhelm us with numbers, superior firepower, and tactical coordination. But those advantages mean nothing against architect technology. The Discovery proved that." "But we can't just destroy their fleet," Stone said urgently. That would turn them into permanent enemies and likely push the other empires toward hostility out of fear. Kane nodded slowly. You're right. We need a demonstration that shows our strength without causing casualties, something that makes them back down without humiliating them further. Peter Clark spoke up. Captain Miller has been working on something. He called it a teaching moment. If the Vraxians attack, we don't fight back conventionally. We show them why conventional warfare is obsolete. Explain, Kane said. Peter pulled up his own display, showing complex mathematical formulas that made Helen's head hurt. Matter manipulation is just the beginning. The architects understood causality itself. They could influence probability, make unlikely outcomes certain. Captain Miller thinks we can alter the conditions of any engagement so that violence becomes impossible. You're talking about reality editing on a massive scale, Stone said. Yes, Peter confirmed. Imagine the Vraxian fleet arrives ready for battle. They fire weapons, launch missiles, deploy fighters, but instead of destruction, their attacks transform into something harmless, not blocked or deflected, fundamentally changed at the moment of creation. Helen tried to wrap her mind around it. You'd rewrite cause and effect. They try to attack, but the universe itself prevents it. Exactly, Peter said. It's not a shield or a defense. It's making warfare itself not work in our presence. The Vraxians can't beat us because fighting stops being possible. Kane studied the formulas. Can it be done? Miller's crew is confident, Peter replied. They need another week to refine the equations, but yes, it can be done. And once we demonstrate it, every species in the galaxy will understand. Earth hasn't just advanced militarily. We've transcended the concept of military conflict entirely. The implications hung in the air. Stone broke the silence. If we can truly do this, it changes everything. The empires can't threaten us. They can't even conceive of threatening us. We become untouchable. But we also become isolated, Helen warned. If we're so different that we can rewrite reality itself, how do we maintain relationships with species that still think conventionally? That's where the Academy comes in, Stone said. We teach them. Slowly, carefully, we help them advance. Not to our level immediately, but toward it. We create a path forward that they can follow. Kane stood and paced. This is bigger than military strategy. We're talking about reshaping galactic civilization, forcing evolution on species that might not be ready. Or saving them from extinction, Stone countered. Admiral, the pattern is clear. The silence or whatever it is destroys civilizations that follow the standard path. The architects built the cage to protect younger races, but that protection has limits. Eventually, every civilization either transcends or dies. We're offering a third option, guided transcendence with help from those who have gone before. Helen saw the enormity of what they were discussing. We're not just defending Earth, we're trying to save the galaxy. Someone has to, Kane said quietly. The architects left the repositories as lifelines. Humanity grabbed one. Now we have to decide if we pull others up behind us or climb alone. A communication alert interrupted them. The display showed Captain Andrew Miller requesting an immediate connection. Stone accepted and Miller's face appeared. Ambassador Stone, Admiral Kane, Commander Morris, Miller said. His expression was serious. We have a development. The Discovery's long-range sensors have detected something, a distortion in deep space beyond the edge of charted territory. What kind of distortion? Kane asked. Unknown, Miller replied, but it matches descriptions from the architect's warnings. A void where space should exist, an absence of reality itself. It's subtle, barely detectable even with our upgraded sensors, but it's there and it's moving. Helen felt cold. The silence, possibly, Miller said, or something similar. The architects warned that becoming visible attracts attention. The Discovery's transformation, our return to normal space, the demonstrations of our capabilities. We've been broadcasting our presence across multiple dimensional layers. Something noticed. Stone leaned forward. How much time do we have? At its current rate of movement, approximately 6 months before it enters the outer regions of galactic space, Miller said. But its speed isn't constant, it's accelerating. Kane's military mind was already calculating. Can we fight it? Unknown, Miller repeated. The architect's records suggest it can't be fought conventionally. It's not a fleet or a weapon. It's more like a natural force. cosmic predator that exists across dimensions. Fighting it would be like trying to punch a concept. Then how did the architects survive it? Peter asked. Miller smiled grimly. They didn't fight, they hid. They learned to exist in ways the silence couldn't perceive or consume. They made themselves incompatible with its nature. That's what the transformation ultimately achieves. We're not becoming more powerful, we're becoming indigestible. So the entire academy program is a race, Helen realized. We need to transform as many individuals as possible before this thing arrives. Yes, Miller confirmed. And not just humans. If the silence is coming, it won't discriminate. Every civilization in the galaxy is at risk. The cage the architects built might not be enough to protect them anymore. Stone stood abruptly. I need to call an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The empires need to know what's coming. Will they believe it? Kane asked. They'll have to, Stone said. We'll share the sensor data. Let them verify it independently. Once they understand the threat is real, maybe the political posturing will stop. Miller's image nodded. Ambassador, I recommend you also share the architect's historical records. Show them the pattern. Thousands of civilizations consumed by the silence. Make them understand this isn't about Earth's ambitions. It's about survival for everyone. After Miller disconnected, the room was silent. Helen looked at each person. Admiral Kane the warrior, Ambassador Stone the diplomat, Peter Clark the scientist beginning his transformation. Each represented a different aspect of humanity's response to the cosmic threat. We should prepare for multiple scenarios, Helen said finally. Best case, the empires unite against the common threat. Worst case, the Vraxians attack while we're trying to prepare for the silence. The Vraxians won't be a problem, Kane said with certainty. Once we demonstrate the causality manipulation, they'll stand down. The real question is whether we can transform enough people in 6 months to make a difference. Peter spoke up. Captain Miller's crew can train multiple students simultaneously. If we expand the program, bring in candidates from all species, we might get 50 or 60 transformed individuals before the silence arrives. That's not enough, Stone said. No, Peter agreed. But it's a start. Each transformed individual can eventually train others. The transformation spreads exponentially once the foundation is laid. Kane pulled up projections. If we assume 6 months until the silence arrives and 3 months per transformation cycle, we can complete 2 full training groups. If each group has 30 students and most succeed, we could have 50 transformed defenders by the deadline. 50 against a cosmic force that destroyed thousands of civilizations, Helen said quietly. 50 who understand reality at a level the silence doesn't expect, Kane countered. The architects survived. We can too, we just need to be smart about it. Stone moved toward the door. I'll convene the council. Admiral, prepare your fleet for the Vraxian situation. Helen, I need Unity Station ready to become the primary training facility. We're about to have students from 5 different species living and studying here. Security will be challenging. I'll handle it, Helen assured him. After Stone and Kane left, Helen remained with Peter. The engineer was staring at his hands, watching them with an intensity that suggested he was seeing more than just flesh and bone. What do you see? Helen asked quietly. Everything, Peter said. The atoms, the quantum fields, the probability waves. It's overwhelming sometimes. There's so much happening at levels we usually can't perceive. Every object, every person, every space between spaces is alive with activity. Is it worth it? Helen asked. The transformation, becoming something other than what you were. Peter looked at her and his changed eyes held ancient understanding. Commander, I've seen the sensor data on the silence. I've studied the architect's records. What's coming doesn't care about politics or culture or individual dreams. It consumes everything. If the price of survival is transformation, then yes, it's worth it. Helen nodded slowly. I suppose we all transform or we all die. That's the choice, Peter agreed. The galaxy just doesn't know it yet. Over the following days, Unity Station became a hub of activity. Ambassador Stone presented his case to the Galactic Council, sharing the Discovery's sensor data on the approaching distortion. The reaction was exactly what Helen expected. Disbelief, followed by independent verification, followed by growing panic. The Kelthran Dominion immediately volunteered 30 candidates for the Academy. Scholar Nalthra personally led the delegation, determined to see his people advance. The Azurian Commonwealth sent 20 candidates after Lieutenant Sora's initial progress reports proved promising. Even the Thel Collective, normally cautious, committed 15 observer units to the training program. The Sorvens negotiated hard, wanting guarantees and concessions before committing resources. Eventually, they agreed to send 10 candidates, all military officers. Captain Voreth made it clear the Sorven Empire was participating under protest, cooperating only because the alternative was extinction. The Vraxians refused entirely. Commander Thex delivered their official response with barely controlled fury. The hierarchy viewed the silence threat as Earth propaganda designed to justify military expansion. They would not be manipulated into surrender through fear tactics. Their battle fleet continued to mobilize. Helen watched the first class of students arrive with mixed feelings. 75 individuals from 5 different species, all volunteering to undergo a transformation that might destroy their minds. They gathered in Unity Station's largest assembly hall, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. Captain Miller addressed them personally. "What you're volunteering for is dangerous. The transformation expands consciousness beyond natural limits. Some of you will struggle. Some of you might fail. But for those who succeed, you'll gain understanding that will help save not just your species but all life in the galaxy. You'll learn to perceive reality as it truly is, not as you've been taught to see it. You'll become something more than you are." Lieutenant Sara stood beside Miller. The Azurian had been training for 2 weeks and already showed changes. Her silver facial markings seemed to glow faintly, pulsing with internal light. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that shouldn't exist. "The training is intense," she told the assembled students, "but it's also beautiful. Imagine seeing colors beyond the normal spectrum. Imagine hearing music in the movement of atoms. Imagine understanding mathematics so deeply that equations become poetry. That's what awaits those who can handle the change." The training began immediately. Miller's crew had prepared specialized chambers where students could be safely exposed to the fundamental structures of reality. The chambers used architect technology to gradually increase perception, allowing minds to adapt without breaking. Helen monitored the progress through regular reports. The results were mixed. Of the 75 initial students, 62 showed positive adaptation. 8 experienced severe psychological stress and had to withdraw. 5 more developed complications that required extended medical care. But the 62 who continued made steady progress. Peter Clark advanced fastest among the human students. Within 4 weeks, he could manipulate simple matter, turning water into wine or stone into sand. Within 6 weeks, he could perceive probability fields and make unlikely outcomes more certain. By week 8, he was operating on a level close to Miller's crew, understanding reality with frightening clarity. The Kelthran students adapted surprisingly well. Their species' natural curiosity and philosophical mindset made them receptive to transcendent concepts. Scholar Nauthra himself underwent the transformation and emerged claiming he finally understood questions his people had pondered for millennia. The Azurians struggled more with the physical aspects, but excelled at the perceptual changes. Their natural empathy allowed them to sense the connections between all things more easily than other species. Several Azurian students achieved consciousness expansion beyond what Miller expected for their stage of training. The Thel units experienced the most unusual adaptations. As mechanical beings, their consciousness already existed in a partly digital state. The transformation merged their artificial intelligence with something organic and alive. They became hybrid entities, neither fully machine nor fully transcendent, but uniquely powerful in their own way. The Sorven students were the most resistant to change. Their predatory psychology fought against the transformation's requirement to see all life as interconnected. Several Sorven candidates withdrew voluntarily, unable to reconcile their hunting instincts with cosmic empathy. But those who persevered became fierce and devoted students, channeling their natural aggression into determination to master the impossible. 3 weeks into the training program, the Vraxian battle fleet arrived at the edge of human space. Admiral Kane's upgraded vessels moved to intercept. Helen watched from Unity Station's command center as 200 Vraxian warships faced 70 Earth vessels. The numbers heavily favored the Vraxians, but numbers didn't matter anymore. Commander Thex broadcast on all channels. Earth vessels, you will stand down and allow inspection teams to board your ships. The Galactic Council has authorized a full investigation of your technology. Resistance will be considered an act of war. Admiral Kane's response was calm. Commander Thex, you're operating on outdated information. The Galactic Council has no authority to inspect Earth vessels without our consent. We invite you to observe what we've learned, then return to your leadership with a clear understanding of why military confrontation is no longer viable. You refuse to comply, Thex said. Then you leave us no choice. The Vraxian fleet opened fire. Hundreds of energy weapons discharged simultaneously. Missiles launched. Fighter craft deployed. It was the most massive military assault humanity had ever faced, and absolutely nothing happened. Helen watched the sensor displays in amazement. The weapons fired correctly. The energy beams traveled at light speed. The missiles accelerated on proper trajectories, but as they approached the Earth vessels, they simply stopped being weapons. Energy beams became streams of light that painted beautiful colors across space. Missiles transformed into seed pods that burst into clouds of harmless spores. Fighter craft found their weapon systems had become musical instruments that played haunting melodies. The Vraxian fleet continued attacking for 10 minutes. Every assault produced the same result. Violence became art. Destruction became creation. War became impossible in the presence of Earth's transformed defenders. Finally, Commander Thex's voice returned, shaken and confused. What have you done? What is this? Admiral Kane replied. This is what the architects taught us. We haven't disabled your weapons. We haven't blocked your attacks. We've simply reminded the universe that violence is a choice, not an inevitability. In our presence, reality itself prefers peace. Helen saw the Vraxian fleet's formations breaking apart. Ships were retreating, pulling back in disorder. They hadn't been defeated. They'd been made irrelevant. Their entire military philosophy had become meaningless in a single demonstration. Commander Thex, Kane continued, return to the hierarchy. Tell them what you witnessed. Tell them that the age of military supremacy is ending. Tell them that Earth isn't their enemy, but the silence approaching the galaxy is everyone's enemy. Tell them we need unity, not conflict. And tell them their warriors are welcome at the academy if they're willing to learn. The Vraxian fleet withdrew without another word. Helen released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That was incredible. That was necessary. Kane's voice came through the station's communication system. Now the Empires understand. We're not playing by the old rules anymore. We're not even playing the same game. Over the following weeks, the galaxy transformed. The Vraxian hierarchy grudgingly sent 10 candidates to the academy, all elite warriors who viewed the training as a personal challenge. The Empire's leadership still maintained official skepticism about the silence, but they couldn't deny what they'd witnessed. The academy expanded rapidly. What had started with 75 students grew to 200 as word spread of successful transformations. Species that had never interacted with each other studied side by side, learning to perceive reality's deeper layers together. Peter Clark completed his transformation after 10 weeks. He could now manipulate matter effortlessly, perceive across multiple dimensions simultaneously, and understand probability so intuitively that he could make miracles seem routine. But more importantly, he retained his humanity. His kindness, his curiosity, his humor. The transformation had enhanced him without destroying who he was. It's important to remember, Peter told Helen during one of their regular meetings. The transformation isn't about becoming more powerful. It's about becoming more aware, understanding that consciousness and reality are intertwined. That thought and existence influence each other. The architects didn't gain power through force. They gained it through comprehension. Helen had resisted considering the transformation for herself. Her role was administrative, practical. She coordinated logistics, managed security, ensured operations ran smoothly. She didn't need to perceive quantum fields or manipulate causality. But as the weeks passed and the silence drew closer, she began to reconsider. The sensor readings showed the distortion accelerating. What had been 6 months away was now 4 months, then 3. The timeline was compressing, and every transformed individual might make a difference. "Commander Morris," Captain Miller said during one of his visits to Unity Station, "you've been considering it, I can tell." "Is it that obvious?" Helen asked. "Your eyes linger on the training chambers whenever you pass them," Miller said gently. "You watch the students with something that looks like longing. You want to understand what they're experiencing." Helen sighed. "I do, but I'm also afraid. I've built my entire life on being practical, grounded. What if the transformation destroys that? What if I lose the parts of myself that make me effective?" Miller smiled. "Commander, the transformation doesn't destroy who you are. Reveals who you've always been beneath the limitations. Your practicality will remain. Your groundedness will remain, but you'll see more, understand more, be able to do more to help." "How many transformed defenders do we have now?" Helen asked. "Including Miller's original crew, we have 87 individuals who have completed the full transformation," Miller replied. "Another 100 in various stages of training. By the time the silence arrives, we might have 200 ready." "Is that enough?" Helen asked. "I don't know," Miller admitted. "The architect's records don't specify how many of them fought the silence. We know they survived by becoming incompatible with its nature. We're following their example, but we're doing it faster with less preparation time. It's a risk." Helen made her decision. "Add me to the training roster. If Unity Station's commander undergoes the transformation, it sends a message about how seriously we're taking this threat." "Are you sure?" Miller asked. "No," Helen said honestly, "but I'm sure that doing nothing isn't an option. The galaxy is changing whether I participate or not. I'd rather change with it than be left behind." Miller nodded approvingly. "Report to Training Chamber 7 tomorrow morning. We'll begin your assessment." That night, Helen stood in her office one last time as purely human. She looked out at Unity Station, at the ships coming and going, at the students training to become something more than they were. The galaxy balanced on a knife's edge between transcendence and extinction. In 3 months, the silence would arrive. In 3 months, they would discover if humanity's desperate gamble had worked, if the transformation could save them, if becoming incompatible with consumption was enough to survive. Helen thought about Admiral Kane's upgraded fleet, about the Academy students struggling to expand their consciousness, about the architects who had faced this threat billions of years ago and found a way to endure, about humanity's choice to grab that lifeline and pull themselves up. The ghost ship had returned with a warning and a gift. The warning was clear. Something vast and hungry was coming. The gift was knowledge, how to survive by transforming into something the hunger couldn't consume. Now the galaxy raced to change before the silence arrived. Species that had barely cooperated were now training together, learning together, transforming together. The old empires and their political games seemed trivial compared to cosmic survival. Helen smiled slightly. Tomorrow she would begin the transformation. Tomorrow she would start perceiving reality's deeper layers. Tomorrow she would take the first steps toward becoming something that could help defend not just humanity but all life in the galaxy. The alarms had screamed when the discovery returned. Now a different kind of alarm was sounding. Not a warning of danger, but a call to action. A call to evolve or perish. A call to embrace the impossible because the alternative was unthinkable. And Helen Morris, practical administrator, grounded commander, would answer that call. She would transform. She would learn. She would become one more defender standing between civilization and the cosmic darkness. The future was uncertain. The threat was immense. But for the first time since the discovery's return, Helen felt hope. Real hope that the galaxy might survive. That consciousness might prevail over consumption. That understanding might triumph over hunger. She returned to her desk and began drafting final reports, administrative details that would need attention while she was in training, contingency plans in case the transformation didn't work, instructions for her staff on how to maintain operations without her direct oversight. But even as she worked on practical matters, part of her mind was already reaching forward, imagining what it would feel like to perceive quantum fields, to understand probability, to touch the fundamental structures of reality itself. The transformation awaited. The silence approached. and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the architect's ancient gift would be enough to save them all. The training chamber was smaller than Helen expected, a circular room with walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Captain Miller stood beside her along with Rachel Bennett, the Discovery's medical officer who specialized in monitoring transformations. "The first session is always the hardest," Rachel explained. "Your mind will try to reject what it's perceiving. That's natural. Human consciousness evolved to process reality at a very specific level. We're going to expand that perception gradually." Helen sat in the chamber's center, in a chair that adjusted to her body perfectly. "What will I see?" "Everyone experiences it differently," Miller said. "Some people see light, others hear music. Some feel connections they never knew existed. The important thing is not to fight it. Let your consciousness expand naturally." Rachel activated the chamber. The walls began to glow with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Helen felt something shift in the air, a pressure that wasn't quite physical. Her vision blurred, then cleared, then showed her things that shouldn't exist. She saw the atoms that made up her body, not with her eyes but with some new sense that had awakened. She saw the quantum fields that connected everything in the chamber. She saw probability waves collapsing into definite states with each moment. She saw time itself as something flexible and strange, and she understood. The session ended after 10 minutes. Helen gasped as normal perception returned. Her head ached, but it was a good ache. "How do you feel?" Rachel asked. "Overwhelmed," Helen admitted. "But also excited," Miller smiled. "That's exactly the right attitude." Over the following weeks, Helen's training intensified. By week 3, she could perform simple matter manipulations. By week 5, she could perceive probability well enough to influence outcomes. By week 7, she understood causality deeply enough to see the connections between all things. By week 8, Helen completed her full transformation. Unity Station now had 212 transformed individuals, but the silence continued approaching. What had been 3 months away was now 6 weeks, then 4 weeks, then 2. The transformed defenders gathered for a final briefing. 212 individuals who understood reality at levels unimaginable to normal consciousness. "The silence arrives in 10 days, Miller said, displaying sensor readings. Scholar Nauthra spoke. "The architects survived by becoming incompatible with the silence. We've followed their methods." Admiral Kane pulled up tactical projections. "We have 300 transformed vessels positioned throughout the galaxy. If the silence attacks conventionally, we can defend." "It won't attack conventionally," Helen said quietly. "I've been studying the architect's records extensively. The silence exists in the deeper layers of reality. It feeds on consciousness itself. When civilizations become too advanced, too aware, they become visible to it." Peter Clark added his analysis. "Our transformed state resists collapse. We're stabilized across too many dimensional layers. So we become anchors," Kira Chen said. "We're not just defending ourselves. We're defending all life by existing in this expanded state." The days counting down were tense but purposeful. The transformed defenders positioned themselves throughout the galaxy. On the final day, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Helen stood in Unity Station's command center. She could perceive across multiple dimensions now, and she could feel it approaching. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of consumed consciousness, collapsed awareness, digested civilizations, and it was here. The sensors registered it simultaneously across hundreds of systems, a presence that defied measurement. The silence had arrived, but so had humanity's resistance. Helen felt the silence's attention turn toward Unity Station. She felt it try to collapse her consciousness, and she felt her transformed state resist. The silence withdrew its attention, moving on, but everywhere it went, it encountered resistance. The confrontation lasted 3 days. 3 days of the silence searching the galaxy. 3 days of transformed defenders maintaining their complex states. 3 days of humanity's gamble proving successful. On the 4th day, the silence withdrew. It didn't leave entirely. It remained at the edges of the galaxy, patient and waiting, but it had learned. Some consciousness could not be easily consumed. The galaxy celebrated cautiously. They had survived. The transformation had worked. Helen stood in her office looking out at Unity Station with eyes that saw far more than they once had. The academy would continue. More individuals would learn to exist across multiple dimensions. The cage was gone. The silence remained a threat. But now the galaxy had a path forward. The ghost ship had returned with a warning and a gift. Humanity had embraced both, and in doing so they had saved themselves and offered salvation to others willing to transform. Commander Helen Morris smiled, perceiving the future across probability fields. The journey was just beginning. The galaxy was changing. Consciousness was evolving. And somewhere in the deeper layers of reality, the architects were watching their ancient plan unfold successfully once again.